You can be fully willing to work on your relationship and still not have what it takes to make the changes the relationship needs. And for a lot of couples, that is a devastating realization because the gap between wanting to grow together and being able to is where so many couples get stuck for years. In this video, we are looking at the difference between willingness and capacity in a relationship and what happens when only one partner has built the capacity to be in it and what we can do about it. We'll explore an introduction to capacity building for people who are new to it and learn how it's a nervous system and somatic learning process, not just an intellectual process. And we'll discuss why it's such a critical skill for all relationship types, monogamous, non-monogamous, and even friendships. We'll also look at why it's helpful to have this in place before coming to couples therapy or relationship therapy, and we will end on what happens if you or a partner decides that they are unwilling to learn these relationship skills in the long term. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm Cyndi Darnell, sex and relationship therapist, working with all kinds of people in all kinds of relationship configurations all over the world. And on this channel, we have the conversations that many of us are having in our heads, but not out loud. Here, we talk about relationships, desire, intimacy, connection, friendships, emotions, grief, and what gets in the way. So if that's what you're here for, you're absolutely in the right place. Let's get started. Now, you've probably been in a conversation, maybe in therapy or maybe just sitting at your own kitchen table, where your partner has said to you, "Yeah, I know I do that," about some pattern, something that they do that keeps hurting you, causing distress or making you feel unappreciated or undervalued in your relationship. And so then when you dig into it and you ask, what's going on? What's this about? They go blank. Not necessarily defensive or argumentative, but you see this emptiness wash over them, and it's really genuine that they don't know what's happening for them internally. And on the surface, that can sort of look innocent enough. But here's the thing, that not knowing your inner world and your motivations and curiosities isn't so much a question of luck as it is a matter of capacity and having developed the skills that it takes to be in relationship with yourself and with someone else. Because without that capacity, relationships tend to become extremely lopsided. And so that blank stare that you're met with usually has a lot less to do with love and a lot more about a skill that was never built. So let's look at this more closely and what we can do about it. Willingness is the part that you can see. It looks like showing up with openness and saying yes to hard conversations, wanting things to be different between you and the person you love. It's real and it matters, and it's often the first thing that either of you notices about the other's commitment and enthusiasm to the relationship. You can say that willingness is love's cheerleader, but capacity is a different thing entirely. It is the ability to stay emotionally present when a conversation gets uncomfortable instead of shutting down or deflecting. It's being able to name what you're feeling beyond words like fine or good or okay or frustrated, and then tolerating how these emotions feel in your body instead of freezing, disconnecting, or even dissociating. It's being curious about your actions or lack of actions, and then paying attention to what's happening internally. It's taking responsibility for your own reactions without collapsing into shame or reaching for blame to relieve the pressure. So let's try an exercise now, which is a nervous system learning practice to help you track your emotions and your inner world in real time. First of all, think of a time that you recently had a complicated discussion with someone. And pause this video for a moment if you need to. Choose something that's relatively tolerable for this practice. Don't choose something especially complex or traumatic. And when you have this memory, close your eyes and breathe in through your nose, pause, and then do an extended exhale out your mouth. Repeat this practice 2 more times. Keeping your eyes closed, put one hand on your belly and then the other on your chest. And in your mind, take yourself back to that situation. Feel the emotions that you felt at that time. Really connect with them. Name them. And we're going for words here beyond just happy or sad. Keeping your eyes closed, your focus is internal. We're looking for words like misunderstood or overlooked or taken advantage of or hurt or indignant or whatever feels correct for you. Try to name as many as you can. And then notice where and how do they appear in your body. Perhaps they appear in your belly. Perhaps in your jaw or in your shoulders or your lower back. It's important to remember in this exercise, we're not trying to get rid of them. We're trying to notice them and welcome them. We're inviting them in and we're staying with them. This is capacity building, having a relationship with our emotions and sensations and not trying to push them away or ignore them or react by yelling. And now slowly bring your awareness back to this video and to my voice. Slowly open your eyes and take a look around the room that you're in and feel yourself sitting on the seat. Welcome back. So this exercise is an introduction to capacity building because capacity isn't a decision that you make in a single conversation. It's a skill that's built slowly through repetition, through practices just like this, but in real life, in real conversations with real people that we care about in real situations. Most of us never learnt to do this as kids, but if we had, life would likely have been significantly better for so many of us as adults. Because when we struggle with this stuff, its origins are usually somewhere outside of this present relationship, long before this relationship ever needed us to show up in this way. Most of us learnt how to deal with emotions in childhood, and by deal with, I mean either ignore or throw tantrums or fight instead of a practice like the one that we just did now. So if we never learnt to be with our feelings in the past, we're going to really struggle with it in the present too, until we learn to do it differently. Willingness and capacity rarely arrive in the same relationship at the same pace, in the same person, at the same time. Now, if you're the partner who has spent years in individual therapy, perhaps reading and journaling and learning to name emotions before you can even fully feel them, or you've learned how to track your nervous system and develop your somatic awareness, you already know what self-inquiry and self-regulation feel like in your body. You've practiced staying present hundreds, maybe thousands of times alone, long before your relationship ever needed it from you. But if you're the partner who hasn't done that work before, showing up willing can feel like it should be enough. There might even be an unspoken expectation that your partner will help you through it, that they will teach you and coax the insight out of you, or sit with you as these little shifts occur, or cheer you on as your capacity expands. And if you're both young or both early in your emotional development, co-learning like this can feel like a shared project, something exploratory and something that's alive. But past a certain point, usually somewhere in your 30s or after you've already lived through a relationship or two, a mismatch like this stops being a shared adventure and starts being a real drag on whether the relationship can thrive. Because for a relationship to grow, both people need to be able to bring their capacity to the table. And if one side hasn't developed that yet, the imbalance shows up no matter how much either of you cares about each other or the relationship. And this is the point that many people start thinking about coming to couples therapy or relationship therapy. But this is something that everybody needs to know before they do that, because couples therapy often works from the assumption that both people arrive with some kind of foundation already in place, like a baseline ability to reflect and sit with discomfort and take responsibility without needing to be rescued from their own feelings. So when only one partner has that foundation, the work gets lopsided fast. And if you're the partner with greater capacity, you'll probably notice that a lot of the sessions seem to be teaching your partner the basics that you learned years ago on your own, often at a real cost to you. And then you watch your partner freeze on a question that you could answer without thinking. And then when finally they land on an insight that you brought to their attention some years earlier, and then everyone in the room treats it like a breakthrough, you're left feeling overlooked, or even worse, you're sometimes feeling erased. And then if you're the partner who's still building capacity, you can feel that gap too, because you can see how far ahead your partner is, how fluent they are in a language that you're kind of still learning the alphabet of. And instead of that feeling motivating you, that visibility and difference can make you feel small, and smallness tends to turn into defensiveness pretty quickly. And you might be tempted to blurt out something like, well, I'm trying, aren't I? What more do you want from me? And that effort on your part is real, but in this moment, you're also coming face to face with big emotions like shame. And shame tends to not move people toward the thing that they're ashamed of, unfortunately. It moves them to armor up and protect themselves from it. And this can make capacity building for the first time in couples therapy, not individual therapy, feel like an even harder task than it needs to be. And this gap often starts out gendered. But by the time we hit adulthood, we've had multiple opportunities to start to develop and hone these skills in more adult ways. So while girls are often taught the skills of emotional attunement and listening at a younger age, and yes, they've had decades to practice it, becoming competent at this stuff in adult relationships becomes a choice all of us make beyond just our childhood influences. Bell Hooks tells us in her classic book, The Will to Change, that the first rule for boys of patriarchy is how it teaches boys to disconnect from their emotions as part of membership into the boys' club and acceptance from other boys and men. And while this is maybe an effective strategy for getting through elementary school, by the time you hit adolescence, the skills that kept you safe in the playground are starting to wreak havoc on your relationships and your interpersonal life. And so many of the men that I work with talk about parts of themselves that became fossilized at 8 or 10 or 12 years of age when they decided that shutting down and toughening up was the only way to get through life. And then because you weren't taught to look inward, because looking inward wasn't what you were being trained for, so then now at 32 or 42 or 52, having a child part in charge of your emotions or dictating your sex life or your relationship or even your marriage seems like a ridiculous idea. But this is exactly what happens when that capacity is not built in adulthood. And then here you both are in relationship therapy, and one of you has been apprenticing in emotional labor for 20 or 30 years, and then the other is just starting, maybe even for the first time, because sometimes a crisis finally forces the issue. And so it's important that we realize that this is not a personality difference. This is a predictable outcome of two very different social trajectories, and it shows up in who initiates the hard conversations, who remembers the emotional undercurrent of last week's fight, who does the reading, who's still learning, and that there is a body attached to the sensation that gets attached to the word overwhelmed, for example. Neither of you built that script on purpose, but the relationship still carries the cost. And by the time you reach a therapist's office, the person who's done the apprenticeship is already exhausted, and the person who didn't is often ashamed. And neither of those states makes it easy to meet in the middle. And then left alone, this gap doesn't stay contained just to hard conversations. It tends to leak into everything, into resentment, which becomes contempt, into decision fatigue, especially for the partner who's carrying most of the load, and then desire that dries up because wanting someone that you're also parenting gets very difficult to sustain. And capacity gaps don't only show up as freezing in hard conversations. Some people can be wonderful partners as long as you're easy to love, happy, independent, not asking for much. And then the moment that you're grieving or anxious or you actually really need them, they disappear. And then that disappearing act tells you a lot more about what their capacity is in the relationship than any anniversary ever will. And so this leads to some really tough questions. How long do you keep extending patience to someone who's willing but not yet capable, especially when you're the one who's carrying the relationship alone? Early on, when there's still room in your energy and your optimism, waiting makes sense. It can even be an act of love. But there is a point where your tank runs empty and needing your partner to catch up stops being the same thing as being willing to wait forever for them to show up with the basics of tending to a relationship as two adults doing life together. And if you're the partner still building capacity, there's a parallel question waiting for you too here. Are you actually building it on your own, in your own time? Or are you waiting for the relationship or your partner or your therapist to build it for you? Because willingness cannot outsource the work of capacity to the person who's already exhausted from doing it alone. Someone can offer you everything a relationship promises: the affection, the sex, the loyalty, the companionship, and still opt out of the actual work it needs. Repairing after conflict, tolerating being told they got it wrong, naming what's broken before it turns into something worse. And if you skip that part long enough, and one person ends up running the relationship alone, the check-ins, the starting the hard conversations, regulating both people's emotions and nervous systems, keeping the connection breathing on their own. What makes this so hard to see clearly is that the people who struggle to stay present are often the same ones who hand you the most unforgettable, magical moments, the perfect weekends, or the conversations that crack you up and crack you open. These moments are real, but if they are the exception and not the pattern, and you are building your experience of the relationship around an exception, this is making you loyal to a possibility or to hope instead of being responsive to what's actually happening in front of you. Because willingness is what someone wants to give you, but capacity is what they can actually sustain, even when it's inconvenient. And only one of those tells you what you're building your life together on. I realize for some of you, the information here may have been a little bit hard to swallow, but that's why I make these videos, because sometimes what looks like love, what we want to be love, can actually feel quite different, especially at the outset, as we're navigating some of these big feelings. And if you would like more support in working with any of this, head on over to my website, cyndidarnell.com. The link is in the description below. You'll find that I have online courses designed to help you develop the skills to build the capacity to be in a relationship with yourself and each other. And I also offer counseling and coaching for individuals, couples, and polycules all over the world. Please like and share this video, share it with people who you think will need it, and leave me a comment below. Tell me, how did this land for you? What did you think about the things that I was saying and the things that I was sharing with you? And how did you find the introductory somatic practice, especially if you've never done anything like that before? I think a lot of people can sometimes think that breathing exercises are about pushing uncomfortable feelings away rather than leaning into them. And this is one of the big differences, I think, with somatic and nervous system work, is understanding that it's not necessarily about feeling better in the short term. You will feel better in the long term, but sometimes in the beginning, things can feel a little bit worse before they feel better, and that's completely normal. I really love making these videos for you, and I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.